yeah, so first of all, thank you everybody for coming. And the purpose of the Impact Place is really to just help drive greater impact for not-for-profits and social enterprises. We do welcome for-purpose businesses as well if they want to come along, but we're very focused specifically on the NFP space. The problems that they're trying to solve keep getting greater, and the funding keeps getting harder to come by. So the greatest way that we can see to assist, beyond contributing in various ways that we do with dollars and time and resources, is to actually help share ideas and stories that can help NFPs generate greater impact from the resources they do have. So that's the purpose of the Impact Place. It's a bi-monthly forum that we run online. We've looked at running it in a physical environment, but it obviously restricts greatly who can turn up. We've looked at a blended environment, but that gets very complicated logistically. So we figured that having it online means that everyone can register from anywhere around Australia and hopefully derive the benefit. So that's the purpose of what we're doing here. And so we're very grateful to have some excellent speakers presenting today. So we have Patum, who's joining us from Ripe, who are one of Microsoft's key distributors and the partner that we choose to work with Microsoft. And so he's going to give us a quick update on what's happening in the Tech for Social Impact space, which is Microsoft's program to support not-for-profits. Then we have Leonie and Christine, who are going to give us a bit of a presentation around using augmented reality to generate greater empathy, which is a fascinating topic. I've seen a little bit of their presentation previously, and they were on Channel 10 a little while ago with an expose of really successful and innovative local businesses, and it's really interesting stuff. And then we're fortunate to have the CEO of Ronald Charities, John Gilmour, who will be presenting about building a culture within a not-for-profit. So we've got some great topics coming up today. So thank you everybody for coming along. So we'll without further ado, we'll start off with the Ripe update. So over to you, Patum, please.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. So as Tristan mentioned, I work for Ripe in the Tech for Social Impact team. So I'm the TSI lead at Ripe. So what we do is we work with partners such as 365 Solutions Group to help nonprofit organizations in their digital transformation journey. So I have like a few updates from the TSI end that I would like to give. Let me share my screen with you. So there have been few changes this year with Microsoft Tech for Social Impact. The first change is there's an update to the nonprofit aged care sector. This is one of the welcome changes, I should say, that we've been waiting for. So previously, before this year, nonprofit aged care weren't eligible for donations and discounts from Microsoft. But starting from 1st of July, now they are eligible. So if you're working in an aged care, nonprofit aged care, or if you know someone who does, please inform them that now they can sort of apply and get the approval. If they have applied previously and been declined, Microsoft will notify them saying that they are now eligible, or we need this documentation to process your application. And the next one is somewhere around the utilization requirement for licensing from Microsoft. So, with the new requirement came into effect last month. So any of the donated licenses that you get from Microsoft, such as Microsoft 365 Business Premium, Office 365 E1, Microsoft 365 Business Basic, you get a certain number of donated licenses. So now it's a compliance requirement that your organization have to use more than 85% of those assigned licenses. So that means basically Microsoft Philanthropies define active usage as a user using at least one M365 cloud services within the past 90 days. And these cloud services include your email, Yammer, Teams, and any of the M365 apps such as Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on. What does that really mean? So let's say if your organization has 300 of business basic licenses, so 255 or more of these licenses, those assigned licenses should be active. So basically they have to use those services or apps within the last 90 days. You can check these activity on M365 Admin Center. So you log in with a global admin on admin.microsoft.com, and you can go into the reports and usage, as you can see on the right hand side of this slide, and you can see which users have been active and which users are using which applications. And after you identify this, what we sort of recommend you is, if you're not hitting that 85% mark, let your users know to start using these services, or if not, you can go into billing and licenses and then unassign those licenses so you stay compliant. So if Microsoft find out that you are non-compliant, and if you are a repeated offender in that case, they will notify you and they will give you a warning. And if you remain non-compliant, Microsoft can take away your TSI eligibility, so you won't be able to receive any of the donations and discounts in the future. So it is really important that you monitor and review your licenses, and you can do that in your admin center. And if you need further help with this, I'm sure Tristan and his team can help you get around this as well. And if you have any questions, you can direct them to me as well. So those are the updates from my end. If you have any questions, please fire them away. Tristan, you are on mute. Tristan, can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was just moving between screens and lost the control to unmute. So yeah, look, Leonie just said she's having trouble seeing the presentation. Is anybody else having trouble seeing the presentation? No, I think not, Leonie. So I'm not sure why that is.
I can't see it either.
Really? Because I'm looking at it front and center in the screen. I'm wondering if you're, yeah.
Yeah, I can see it fine.
I've got like gears on the screen, and then it's got reload to display. Well, let's try reloading and see what happens. Oh, it's come back now for me.
What I can do is I can send these slides to Tristan as well, and if anybody needs to have a look at it later, he can send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah. But, Christine and Leonie are both that they have separate businesses, but they're both collaborating through Equal Reality, which is this organization that has developed some fascinating tools within AR to help train people in empathy. And I've seen some really good stuff here and would love to bang on about it, but I think it would be far more appropriate for Leonie and Christine to take over. So I'll hand over to you guys.
Thanks, Tristan. Thanks, everybody. Hope everybody's well, wherever you are. And thanks for having myself and my colleague, Leonie Sanderson, on today. So we're here to basically give you a brief rundown around the use of immersive technology, in particular virtual reality, as part of your training around diversity, inclusion, empathy within your respective organizations. Now, we know that there's a lot of conversations that are happening in the workplace around how do you create more psychologically safe, more inclusive, more empathetic workplaces, and how do you actually have some of the more difficult conversations around inclusion and diversity in a way that's safe, in a way that's inclusive for everybody. And really, VR is an effective tool for putting you in the position of somebody else's shoes. And so walking a mile in somebody else's shoes and really having that that experience. And as a lot of you know, VR technology originated in the gaming space. So the application and the use of it as a training tool is really something that is pretty new. And how this is shaping up is an area that Equal Reality have really immersed themselves as a business. They are an Australian business. Leonie works for Equal Reality. I'm an accredited consultant and partner with Equal Reality. So we'll basically, I'll hand over to Leonie and she will take you through a presentation around, it'll talk a bit about the technology, but how the technology is actually applied, what the benefits are around it versus traditional training. We'll take questions along the way if you feel you need to ask any questions, but sometimes if you wait until the end of the presentation, some of those questions may get answered along the way. But I guess the thoughts that I'd like you to have in the back of your mind as you're listening is, how could this apply to your organization? How could this complement existing training that you already have? How could this be a new tool that you could introduce into your organization to either begin or raise awareness around the conversations around empathy and inclusion within your organizations? Are you having these conversations, and how are you having them? How are you bringing in different training methodologies to support those conversations?
And I guess one of the things that I wanted to acknowledge right up front is that inequality is something that's really been in the spotlight over the last 12 to 18 months. So if we think of like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, these things have really been front and centre for a little while now. And even if we think about COVID-19, and particularly not so much in Australia, but in other countries where we've seen that bias in the healthcare system has really had an impact on people's lives. So these things are really important. McKinsey estimates that even with all the billions of dollars that have been put into the work around gender and gender equity and equality, that we've still got 200 years to go before we will see gender equality happen in the workplace. So what can we do to really make that a little bit of a shorter timeline? Virtual reality has been shown to really have a bit of an edge over traditional learning methods. So especially when it comes to memory. So people tend to remember their virtual reality experience a lot more than in their traditional learning methods. Yeah.
Sorry, Leonie, I'm just going to ask, can everyone else mute themselves if you're not talking? Just there's an echo in the background. If people could just mute themselves. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine.
Sorry about that.
And they've also been really shown to reduce some of that bias, increase empathy, and lead to behaviour change. And that's and if you're interested in the research around that, then I would highly recommend going and having a look at the Jeremy Balanson the Immersive Lab at Stanford University, where you can see the research that's been happening around that and continues to happen. The way that we do virtual reality is that we try to embody the user. So we literally put you in the shoes of somebody else. So just as Christine said, it's about walking a mile in someone else's shoes. Here you can see, this is actually Christine trying on the headset. So you'll use a virtual reality headset. They come in a few different shapes and sizes these days. They're pretty portable. They don't need a computer to be tethered to anymore. They're pretty light and easy to use. And you put that headset on and you actually look into a mirror and you can see who you've become. So you literally become somebody else. And we call that embodiment, and use that perspective taking to drive the experience. We'll take you into a scene where you might witness some bias and witness discrimination. And you can have the opportunity to interact, to make some decisions, or to be a bystander. So, and this is one of the advantages that virtual reality really brings, is that you can practice in a situation where it's safe. So you can try out different things and see if they work, and have that avatar respond to you. So really, really clever machine learning can actually do that now with a voice recognition where we can trigger different responses. Our scripting is pretty good, so we can kind of cover off on most responses that people will get. In the way that voice recognition is working now with the technology is really shifting and changing. So we're seeing that as a growing and an innovative space all the time. But normally what we would do is give you some different options to choose from and then follow that up with a session at the end where we would reflect and have some conversation and really kickstart those difficult conversations that we might have in the workplace about racial bias, discrimination, unconscious bias, end-of-life discussions if you work in healthcare, anywhere where it's a difficult conversation. The results are pretty good. So, you know, what we found is that empathy and using immersive techniques does really improve, that people feel that they really want to make a difference, that their behaviour actually has some shift. That the engagement is a lot higher. So it's that memory piece again, that people actually retain the content a lot longer than in traditional learning methods. So this is just a bit of this is a scene from one of the pieces that we've done recently with Viacom CBS in the US, and this one was actually focused on Black Lives Matter and some discrimination in the workplace. And you can see that we can model almost any environment. So this was actually one of the studios that looks out onto Times Square that Viacom CBS use on a regular basis. So that really adds to, for a lot of organisations when we're doing something customised, it really adds to the sense of authenticity and realness if we use those environments that are existing. And we really do see that we can scale. So with COVID-19, we actually moved to doing some things in flat screen that could be generated on a laptop because people were feeling a little bit unsure about using headsets. And that's actually been really successful as well. So interactive experiences that you can generate from your computer. And this is just some of the things that people have talked about. You know, so when they go through those experiences where they're being discriminated against, they feel it. They feel it as if it was happening to themselves. And so it's a little bit like being in a role play, but you're in a situation where it's you. So it's a different way of doing a role play that's a little bit more scalable, a little bit more novel, and has that stickability, if you like. It gives people a bit of an aha moment. And I guess the last thing is that it is a really new technology, and it's shifting and changing all of the time. And along with that is the price of things. So you can get a headset now. The Oculus Quest 2 comes in at about $399 US. They've become a lot more affordable. There are a range of different headsets, not just Oculus. There are a range of different companies who are making them, but it's shifting and changing all the time. So we're really seeing that this technology is becoming a lot more accessible to organisations across the board. So I really just wanted to keep it nice and brief today. That we want to move that 200-year time frame if we can, and I hope that gave you a bit of an overview of what the virtual reality is like. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Leonie. And the only thing I wanted to add on the end is that a lot of what we're seeing in the diversity and inclusion space, particularly is the conversations are at different levels in terms of that continuum. So you find that in the UK, the conversations around even the use of languaging in the workplace, the use of pronouns and things like that are quite mature, and they're quite embedded, and people have really adopted a sense of language and a sense of understanding around what inclusion and diversity looks like in the workplace. And what the languaging looks like. In Australia, I think we're still, rather at the beginning of that. Quite a lot of organisations have set about putting in diversity and inclusion strategies in place, but don't really know the practical application around it. So Leonie mentioned, some of the works that Equal Reality have done around end-of-life conversations for different multicultural communities. So I'm from a multicultural background, and you find that the conversations that would be culturally safe and supportive for me to have around an end-of-life process looks very different from even my colleague in an Indian space or somebody in an Australian space. Now, how do you then, as a manager or as a manager of a practice, I guess, implement how staff can, if you're running a nursing organization, for example, or a palliative care organization, how do you implement processes that actually support that diversity and that multiculturalism? So using VR, you can actually then have the experience of, being a bystander, being, in that person's shoes and taking on that persona of how you could have those conversations and how then that experience translates into the changes that you would make. And that's the stuff that, my consultancy, Utano Consulting, get really excited about, is how can you then use this as a tool to actually lever the change within your organization? Because it's one thing to have the conversation, it's another thing to have the training, but then the next thing is, what is the corresponding action from that? And that's where we're seeing, organizations getting really, really stuck as to, so then what does this actually mean for me? How does this look different? So I've got, people that work for me that are of Muslim faith, people that work for me that are of Jewish faith, or people that work for me that are young mothers. How do I create an equitable system across the workplace that recognizes that diversity? And COVID has really brought in this whole flexible work arrangement. And so, as Leonie said, the past 18 months, this conversation is coming at all of you from very different fronts. And you see leaders and managers constantly struggling with, okay, how do I, first of all, raise awareness around my organization that this is happening? What instruments then, after I've raised the awareness, had the training, what then do I actually can practically do? Moving forward, because, having the conversation, as I said, is one thing, but what we really want to see is that conversation shift into some real actionable steps around that. And also, just one last point in terms of the VR learning itself, while we don't have longitudinal data yet, studies do show that the retention of what people have learned through this experience, they retain a lot of that information a lot longer, and the impact of it stays. It's the residual impact is a lot longer than traditional training methodologies would have. So thank you, Tristan. Any questions for us?
Yeah, look, thank you both of you for the presentation. I mean, I think this is a topic that is becoming more and more pertinent every day. And in fact, I caught up with Raj yesterday. Yesterday, and Raj, you mentioned that you had bumped into something similar. So did you want to just share quickly about that?
Sure. So I work for a Indigenous First Nations Peoples School. We are a school of excellence at Springfield. And I was talking to one of my friends, and she worked in animation for a long time. And then she one day told me that they are working on VR, and it's a Brisbane-based company. And she got a prototype for us to have a look at it. So this is before I joined Himbayamba Independent School. I worked for Human Services for 10 years. And
oh, right.
No.
Froze.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, you just froze there for a moment.
Sorry, can you hear me now? The internet isn't great. So the problems what we are dealing in human services are human-centric problems, human problems. So what she tried to show me is, and I have seen more and more in after working here, is what these kids, or what we call them jajams in Indigenous language, their lack is role models and mentors. So, for example, when I work in this school and I see these kids and I ask them, what do you want to become? They never say, I want to become an accountant, or they want to become a doctor. They said, I want to be a footy player, or I want to do this, because that's what they see. That's what their role models are. So this is something which technology can help. Through a VR technology, they can see somebody what they can be and what they can aspire for. So this lady, my friend, was talking to me about through VR how she is changing the mindset of people, because they can be the avatar. They want to be, oh, this is what I can become. Or this is something which they can visualize. So if you can't visualize, it's very hard to see yourself 3 years, 4 years down the line. So it's very interesting, and glad that I met Trishram yesterday, and Trishram told me about the topic today. So no, thank you so much for presenting your case. It's fantastic.
And
Thank you, Raj. Appreciate it.
You're in my neighborhood, Raj. Humber Myers School is just up the road. My son used to go to TSAC, Springfield Anglican College, so I know where you are.
Right. I recently joined the school. I am very new to the school. I worked in not-for-profit for over 10 years. So I only joined the school in April, and it's an amazing school, but yeah.
It's a fairly new school. We got some questions, Gary.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes, I can.
So I'm with Australian Red Cross. We're trialling a virtual reality program with young offenders at the moment in Toowoomba. It wasn't based on efficacy. It was based on the fact that kids would probably enjoy it and it would have an impact. It's about choices, consequences, etc. So we're trying it to see how it goes, but really interested to hear a little bit about the evidence base. And it was good to hear the reference there. And then for me, it's about the cost of programs, the length of programs, and also probably a bit about whether they're Australian or American. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And so perhaps Christine and Leonie, you might be able to follow up with Gary after this and have a broader conversation around that, because I think it is a fascinating topic. And Joe, will come to you, but Marie-Claire, I think you had your hand up there before as well.
Thanks, guys. Fascinating, the coolest thing I think I've seen all week. Just wondering, I'm thinking about various people that I might refer you to. Do you have standard kind of, I saw that you talked about co-design for specific organisations. Do you have standard things that might fit into the baseline training that people do around diversity and inclusion? So, whether it might be handling customers more generally, handling complaints, anything like that, or is it all co-designed and bespoke?
So we've got some customized solutions that some generic solutions that we've started developing. So for example, unconscious bias training. So we can definitely have a chat to you, I guess, afterwards around some of our product offerings around that.
Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. And then Joe, you had your hand up as well.
I apologise. I actually dropped out and technology got the better of me for most of that. But when I came back, something was really interesting to me. Was about 10 years ago now. I did a program with some underprivileged youth in Melbourne off the streets, and it was arts based, and it was specifically for them to reframe themselves, how they saw themselves. So what we did was a 12-week course where we got together and we talked about role models of theirs and why they like those role models and what they wanted to emulate from those role models. And then we actually did, with all of my contacts, I used to be in the arts down in Melbourne, all of my contacts, I had a professional hair and makeup person, a professional costumier, MTC helped us out with the costumes. We did a professional photo shoot, and then we took those photo shoots to a gallery showing, and they were sold, and then they were allowed to keep some prints for themselves, but the large ones were sold, and then they kept the money from that. But that was all about reframing themselves in their own mind. And I think, something like this is incredible. At the start, you said walking in someone's shoes. I think it is just as simple as being seen in a different person's clothes that actually has a significant impact. So, I mean, this, I'm so sorry that I missed it. I don't miss the whole thing. But I think that, yes, it makes such an impact. And if it is VR, that's great. so I would like to see more, but I'll have to get the website or something because I missed it. I'm sorry.
We have the recording, Jo, so we'll be able to share that with you afterwards.
Okay, yeah, great, thanks.
And yeah, feel free to reach out, obviously, to Christine and Leonie afterwards. Leonie's, I think, just shared her contact details. So an excellent session and obviously a hot topic. Any last questions or comments before we move on? So yeah, anyone who wants to reach out, obviously, to Christine Leonie and find out more, please do so afterwards. You have the details there, and I'll certainly share a link to the recording for everybody once the session is over and it's rendered. So you'll get that later on. So yeah, thanks again. That was awesome. Now, the next topic is for John Gilmour to present, who's the CEO of Ronald McDonald House Charities. Yeah, so it's about culture creation and how you build a culture within a non-for-profit. So I'll let John take it over from here. So over to you, John.
Thanks, Tristan. And unfortunately, technology has failed me, and I'm going to rely on Olivia to move the slides. So we're going to have a code that says go, just instead of saying next slide all the time. So my apologies, and thanks to Tristan and the team for inviting me. And just wanted to really try and share my experiences over a career in not-for-profit and see where we go from there. I am going to be really sneaky and just take the first minute or so to talk a little bit about Ronald McDonald House Charities, because most people know the name, but they don't understand exactly what we're up to. So we'll just keep going on to the next slide as we go. So go. So we're a global charity. We support families of seriously ill and injured children and expectant mothers with high-risk pregnancy. So that's certainly our catchment and area of focus for our mission. It was created in the United States in 1974. Interestingly, people think it was McDonald's that started it, but was a partnership between the Philadelphia Eagles NFL football team, who had one of their players at the time have a daughter diagnosed with leukemia. And it was the football team that identified with Philadelphia Children's that there was nowhere for parents to stay when they were trying to deal with complex issues of children in hospital. My background is in hospital and healthcare. I'm a physio by profession, so I have a pretty good understanding in paediatrics that in my early career, certainly parents were not catered for near the bedside or very nearby. The charity is now, its headquarters is in Chicago, worldwide, and it operates a federated license structure and creates chapters. And we get approval to be a chapter from Ronald McDonald House Charities. And then what they have is they have core license programs that include Ronald McDonald, and the following things are, you probably all know about our houses. So we actually provide accommodation to families who generally need to travel to come to specialist care in both paediatric and maternity hospitals throughout the world. We also have a go. We also have what we call family rooms. And Olivia, I'll just get you to keep clicking. It's not coming up, sorry. Family rooms, we'll just talk about that, didn't come up on the slide. So family rooms are lounge areas built in hospitals that are available to any person in the hospital to have a break, have a cup of coffee, kids to do some activities, just to chime out, get on the internet. We also run a learning program. We will supply up to 40 hours tutoring with a teacher to any child anywhere in Australia to try and help them to catch up after they've missed more than 3 months of school through serious illness. And we also have been lucky to obtain 5 holiday units, apartments across Australia, and we make those available to families who have actually lost a child in the last year and enable the family to have some time out and have a break. And then hospitality carts is a new offering that we're now doing in much smaller hospitals, and we've launched the first one in Mount Isa Hospital, supporting children and mums in hospital with goods and activities. And as of this month, there are 311 chapters throughout the world, 377 Ronald McDonald houses, 266 family rooms across 45 countries in the world. Go. Our chapter here at South East Queensland, there are 11 chapters in Australia. We are by far the busiest and the largest of them. We currently operate 3 Ronald McDonald houses. We run a South Brisbane house with 87 rooms, a house at the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital at Hurston with 47 rooms, and we actually have a Ronald McDonald house built inside the Queensland Children's Hospital across the road from the South Brisbane house, which is 10 rooms specifically for paediatric intensive care families. We have 3 family rooms, 1 again at the Queensland Children's Hospital, and we have 2 at the Gold Coast University Hospital. And one of those actually has 2 sleep rooms in it as we go. And we run the learning program and a scholarship program for kids moving into tertiary education. The charity doesn't do healthcare. We actually try to support the families while they're seeking healthcare. The other good thing is that we're not disease specific. We are open to any condition, any person that is actually either in mum's tum or been born prematurely up to 18 years of age. And so the other thing is that through our sponsors and support, we have no charge to any family that accesses any of our services. The biggest question I often get asked, and the big misnomer, is certainly McDonald's, we're our founding sponsor. They created us. They are continued to be our major sponsor, but they don't pay for everything, and nor do they actually tell us what to do anymore. They have purposely allowed us to grow into our own charity. But at the same time, for my chapter, McDonald's would be responsible, including their licensees, for around about 50% of the cash that I need to actually operate. But McDonald's also flex their might with their global might and their partnerships. Good examples, they pay for all my insurances. My safety systems are all provided by McDonald's at free of charge. They actually work with their suppliers, pools called now Lactalis. No house in Australia buys milk any day of the year because pools donate the milk to us to make sure that the families are supported. So we love McDonald's. They are fabulous. They do great things like McHappy Day and all those sorts of things, raising money for us. But we certainly still work with the community to get other fundraising as we go. I think that's enough of my pitch, except for the last slide, just to give you a picture of our chapter. Go, Olivia. For the first 6 months of this year, so we take families from all over Queensland, Northern Territory and Northern New South Wales, and we also look after our Pacific neighbours. And in the first 6 months of this year, our chapter, just here in South East Queensland, we've looked after 2,600 families staying at our house. They've stayed an equivalent of 17,500 bed nights. Average stay is about 7 nights, but our longest ever stay in our houses in South East Queensland without going home, 522 nights away from home for a family with a child with cancer. Our family rooms this year, we've had 10,300 visitors through those, and we've had 90 children already on our tutoring program across, and thank God for Zoom. There's been a positive out of COVID. We've now moved to virtual tutoring across Australia now, where we can connect kids with teachers from all over the place, which has really helped us in delivering on children. So that's my pitch. We just thought, really, let's get into organisational culture. I really think it is the key topic for all of us, whether we're an organisation of 40 people or 1,000 people. I think they're really important. So you can go and Google multiple definitions. Let's not bore us all with that. The focus of this is really just touching on a few things and then some living examples of what I think is really important as a leader with a not-for-profit. I love the terminology and definition, the way we do things around here. I think it's the simplest and easiest of all the people, and that's the things you do, both written and unwritten. And when I go around looking at different conversations about organisational culture, you see the following words up on the screen that pop up all the time. So it's a real mix of symbolism and values and beliefs, rituals that happen, what is the norm in your place. The one thing we really do know about organisational culture is it's certainly a shared element. It's enduring. It doesn't go away. You can change it, it can evolve, but it never leaves your organisation, and it's very pervasive. If you think it's not out there, it's definitely out there, and it's very implicit in everything that we do. And I think it's a really important element for us to understand. I think it's with us every step of the way. Go, Olivia. The other interesting one for not-for-profits, I think, in my experience too, and I'd be really interested to see after the chat room what other people think. I think the fabulous thing about not-for-profits, whether it's our staff or volunteers, I think we generally attract people who have some sort of automatic passion or connection to whatever purpose you're about. It's something that they actually have an attraction to. I think not-for-profits generally have an approach to fundamentally it's about service to others and trying to do good. It's not about not making a profit, it's just not distributing it to shareholders, because as I often say to people, no margin, no mission. And so we really need to get this thinking out of people's heads that we need to be, borderline every time that we're doing things. I think sometimes the people we attract, and this is no negativity, there are limitations to sometimes what happens. When you have to have a difficult conversation, when you really want to talk about culture and behaviour that actually isn't going well, sometimes people can feel quite aggrieved because I'm donating my time, I'm here for the good of people, I go the extra mile. But sometimes I think it has a problematic element to it because people can overstep the mark and then start doing things that are not in line with culture and can create a range of other difficulties that occur. And I've certainly been challenged in my experience in not-for-profits when I've actually challenged people's behaviours and dealing with difficult conversations. They've often challenged me of that's not very mission-based, and I often talk about, well, I think it's very important we do it because this is an honest and respectful conversation to ensure that we are actually delivering on our mission. So I'll be interested to see what other people think, but I think it has a little two-edged sword. Our staff and volleys come with great passion, great commitment, but sometimes it can get in the way of what we're trying to do. We all struggle with that funding limitation. We're often signing contracts with limited funding, and so it's very hard at times to give longevity to programs and what you're doing, and so that can influence your cultural approach. And I think we've taken the approach here at Ronald McDonald House Charities because we have about, in my organisation, I have about 40 staff and about 200 volunteers that work with us in delivering our services. We've actually come to the model that says there is really no difference to the expectations of the behaviour and culture of a volunteer as it is to a staff member. But sometimes we need to be a little bit more responsive to the volunteer, that they've got more limited time and they are making a free commitment to us. And so sometimes we have to make those cultural experiences and learnings for them a bit easier to get. I come from the healthcare industry, and I think an interesting one that we think's been really important in the cultural world, and I think the healthcare system, a bit like in the first presentation, I think they've got a lot to learn still for such an experienced industry, and I'm very biased. But I really love this approach to just culture in the health systems, where it really talks about three key elements: about to err as human, and I'll talk about those in a minute, withholding judgment, and then the pyramid of behaviour. And I just want to touch on that because it leads, on the next slide, we won't go there yet, because it leads to a safety reporting culture is what they're about. And I'll talk about those in a little bit more on the next slide. But just to finish off before we go to those elements in the healthcare industry, I think the other thing I've learned over time, and it'd be interesting to see what other people say, is I do believe that the culture is palpable. You can walk into an organisation and within a day, a half day, a couple of days, you can truly get a sense and feeling of what its culture is. And I think it goes back to that. It's just the way things are done, and it's that unwritten, palpable, how does it feel? And the other one we've learned here, and we've really embraced it, and I'll share that with you, is that I've seen organisations say, oh, that's HR's job. That's the CEO's job. No one else's job. It's everyone's. And in fact, I think it's middle managers and the leader that are the fundamental people that can make the difference in it. So I'm going to go to the next slide, Olivia, thanks, and just talk a little bit about, so under this approach of just culture, we really have a concept here where we are all human and we make mistakes. And we need to try and keep that in perspective. And every time that we have a meeting now, or we start a gathering of people, we actually have this statement of actually called, we're all going to rethink about withholding judgment. And what we're saying is, we're always going to say, we believe every person comes to work with the best intention to do their job well. They're going to treat our families as a priority, because this is very RMHC focused, and to be a competent and respectful team member. And so we use that term to say, so when someone hasn't done something that you come on to the next shift and they didn't do the paperwork for family X, the instant is, instead of going, bloody Shirley, she's hopeless at her job, how many times have we got to tell her? It really is that withholding judgment, saying, I wonder what happened in Shirley's day-to-day that stopped her from getting that done. And maybe it was, we know she comes with the right intentions, and we give people the benefit of the doubt every time. Now, that's a cop-out. Some people say it's a cop-out. People are sneaky. People are going to play the game. And that's where it comes back to the behavioural pyramid of just culture. And what that says is that the vast majority of people do come to work to do the right thing. And as long as you establish foundations on the bottom of the triangle, that you train them, you set expectations of what you want in their behaviour, and you actually are clear and consistent about what you do, you can set up a workplace that has a cultural foundation to enable people to succeed. What we also then see is when a mistake happens in something, we generally take the first judgment of saying either we didn't support the human well enough with training them or explain clearly what was expected, or the system and process has got a fault, and how can we fix it? And so it's that positive, let's withhold negative judgment, let's positively go, what went wrong and how can we actually help this person? And sometimes the system was right, the person was trying, but they just made a mistake. And it happens once and we learn and people move on. And we think that the just culture says that's the vast majority of interactions and mistakes and learnings about things in a business or an organisation. And then we get to the next two pieces of the pyramid, which is the at-risk behaviour. This is someone who wants to continuously, multiple times, make the same mistake or not follow the same process. And it's obvious that they don't want to comply to what needs to be done. And that's when we actually have to reverse the withholding judgment and move into how do we actually clearly counsel and manage this behaviour. And we start to move into remediation of behaviour and what they're doing. And then the final one in the medical world goes, and then there are people who just want to be downright reckless. They don't care about processes and procedures. They keep defying. And at that point in time, when they continue, it's time to make a decision of whether someone should stay or not. And in the just culture pyramid, they say that top pyramid is 1% of your organisation will end up at that point. So we take that model of the vast majority want to do the right thing, set them up for success, and it will really help to build into your organisational culture. So we'll keep going. Thanks, Olivia. So we're really going to now just go into learnings specifically to RMHC and us. I think the one thing is I've learned along the way is I think we as CEOs and leaders and senior managers are a key influencer. It is everyone's job, but they watch us. It's what you do more than what you say. And it's that old adage of walking the talk. I am overwhelmingly aware of just how much your actions as a leader influences the behaviours of others. And it can be very conscious or unconscious. You can be really overt or subtle. And when you really want to be a leader who openly wants to change culture, you can do it big bang or progressive. But I am continuously amazed at how much we change the world in that regard. And I think two things that really change what you deliver as a leader is if you are consistent in the way you respond to things, in that it's not the same answer. What I'm saying is you're seen to apply the same consistent ethics and principles when making a decision, and that you have a sense of honesty and integrity in that decision making. I think they're the two fundamental elements that actually can undermine a culture really quickly as a leader if you don't do those. The other one I've signed on to, my belief of leadership is a servant leadership. And I know people have heard that terminology before. So servant leadership is really about, I see my role as actually enabling other people to do their work. And I'm here to make everybody else's job work a bit better. It's not about me. And one of the things I've seen just over the last recent times of joining RMHC in the last 3 years is a few living examples that I think I've been able to influence a bit of culture change as we go. In one of our houses, I was the only person with a dedicated car park. Everybody else had to find parking. My position was given a car park, and we had guests and families missing out on car parks who were driving. So I handed back my car park. I needed to be no different to any other staff member, and we needed to be here for the families. Back to that withhold judgment. It was all about what was best for the families. And I was amazed at how much of a difference that made in just sending that message to people. I had a locked away office up on one of the higher floors and wasn't in the general circulation. Very quickly, I moved to open plan work desk, hot desking with the rest of the team. What it did for me fabulously is I heard and saw what was going on. I could palpably feel the culture. I knew what was happening, and they were having an opportunity to interact with me, and I thought that was fabulous. One of the great things of RMHC is that we actually have a saying here. Families don't stay in our office, we live in their house. We work in their house, and that's true. All of our staff work within our facilities, and so we run into our families every day. So walking between meetings and going to see somewhere, I'll run into 2 or 3 families. And so it just keeps us grounded and focused on what we're about. And I think there's nothing more than that living and breathing every day of what it is that we're about, and that reminder. I tend to find sometimes corporate offices can lose sight of the true mission. And I think it's really good if you have that diversified structure. It'd be great for you to get back out and about. The cot build's a funny one. We were in the lockdown in January. This is a bit of an anecdote. We were in lockdown, but it certainly didn't stop critical kids turning up on our doorstep. And we had our busiest day of babies, would you believe, during lockdown. And we ran out of cots that were already built and made, and we had this influx of kids. I had 3 people being isolating for a COVID test, and we lost our main maintenance person, and we needed to put kit packs of 3 cots together to make sure 3 new babies could sleep the night. And there was no one left except me. So I was the highest paid cot maker for that morning. I lost a few Allen keys. God, I hate them. But it was great for the staff to see that we just pitched in, got it done. And it was all again about, at least we knew that 3 or more babies were going to have a nice safe cot to sleep in that night. And I was no better than anyone else than getting off my bum and getting in and putting the cots together. And again, we just keep that focus on what else can we do to improve our families. They're real things. I keep having that conversation. What else can we do with our staff to generate that culture of rethinking and always wanting to improve? And the final one there, I made a decision from a previous learning that if the organisation ever has to end the employment of someone through disciplinary matters or through cutbacks or whatever, I actually deliver the message. I don't make other people do that. In our organisation, my managers are involved in it. But if we have to make that very terrible, hard decision that someone needs to go, I think the boss has to actually deliver that message. So they're my little examples of how I've really tried to do living experiences as we've gone. Thanks, Olivia. We'll keep going forward. It's bouncing around a bit, but we'll get there. I've just mucked this up on her. So she's just trying to get through the slides and keep going because we're nearly there. A few examples as well. Here we are. So we have a set of values we established in our organisation. We actually developed it with input from everyone. So we actually have a core statement of what the values of our organisation are, and we embed them in everything that we do. It's in every position description. It's actually at the front of meetings. It's part of business cases. It's always referenced. We also have a formal code of conduct that everybody signs every year, that reaffirms the behaviours that we commit to personally and to each other, which just brings it to line of sight. We also think that reward and recognition is really important, no matter how small it is. And it's not really the prize, it's actually the process of acknowledging when people go above and beyond. And I think it builds that fundamental response of recognising people for doing a good job. It's not, and the other thing that we've really brought in over the last couple of years is we now have a requirement for 100% performance development planning for every staff member every year, and it's part of a manager's KPI that you will deliver it. This is not about performance management. This is about planning the development of someone for the year coming, and how do we positively deliver on it so that they know that they're delivering strategically and to their key job requirements, and how are we developing them for the future. And we've really got ahead there, and we are actually achieving our milestone for the first time after 2.5 years of launching that as we go. And the other the other part of that one is that we clearly got the message from people when people are not doing a good job, when people do need to be judged, when people are reckless or want to continue to act recklessly, we need to manage their performance and their behaviour. And they want a process that's very clear, it's confidential, but it holds people to account. And we've certainly made it really clear that every person in the organisation now understands how we have conversations with people about improving. And I think that's taking us a long way forward. Thanks, Olivia. Last couple. So there's our values. We try and capture it in one page, and we actually describe behaviours and actions below those words. And so this is on every desk. It's in the staff room. It's part of our build up, and it just keeps us reminded about what we're doing. And it looks different for each different organisation, but I think it's a real fundamental to reaffirm what are the values that relate to how you will treat each other. We also, next slide, thanks Olivia, go. So we have reward and recognition as well. Just wait for it to pop. So at our quarterly, we have monthly all staff meetings, thank God for Teams and Zoom. And we do the Emmy Awards where people get to nominate their colleagues, whether they're volunteers or staff members. And we then announce who is that person. I make the final selection as the final arbiter, but it is nominated by the staff and volunteers. And it's a very small gift, but boy, it actually is a great celebration of when people go that extra mile. Go, Olivia. And the other one that I really think is a key, if you're not already doing it, I think we need to understand what our customers and staff really think. And I think surveying and formal feedback is really critical. I think it's a must. And I've got a few little ones on that. I think if you're going to do it, you need to read the findings and you actually need to share it back to the audience that told you. So you need to actually see that what they said got read and seen. I think the rule is if you want to do this and you want to ignore their comments, I think it's at our peril. And I've heard many a manager and leader say, that's just their belief, that's their perception, that's not real. It is. That's their reality. And I think CEOs who bother to survey people and then ignore it, you might as well not survey them, because I think you're actually doing a bigger damage to yourself. And when we actually get the clear messages from what the team are telling us, we actually do something about it. We set an action plan each year to address it. And every opportunity we get that we're doing something to respond to it, we go back and refer to, this was what you told us. So we make sure that we're reaffirming that we listen and something happens because of the effort to do that surveying. And we certainly make sure that that surveying is anonymous and done through a third party. The other ones too, I think, is learning and development. I think we've put a bit more money into developing people. They actually appreciate it, and I think it changes the way the culture thinks about themselves. And finally, despite COVID and everything, we've continued with our all staff meetings, because the clear message I get from surveys is you can never communicate enough. And I think taking opportunity where people hear a consistent message is a really important thing. And so there is no excuse for lockdowns and working flexibly and offline, that you can't still have those conversations. And my last slide, you'll be happy. Oh, second last slide. I just thought I'd share with you, happy to share it. Here are our staff engagement results. We do engagement surveys with our volunteers as well. And we also do separate volunteers to our families who use our service. And just a really quick picture there. Happy for these slides to be shared with you all. We're really proud of the fact that we think on the journey that we've been on in the last 3 years, we're moving our dial in the right direction with a lot of those things we've been implementing in the last 3 years. And so we're really happy. Participation rates going up, so it's meaningful responses. We are seeing our engagement go up, and we're seeing our disengagement going down, except COVID was a very interesting year for all of us. We dropped a little there. And the other thing we love about it is people get to write text comments. I read every one of those text comments. As a Chief Executive Officer, I make sure I read every word of those 880 or 574 comments, because I think that's where there's some real gems hidden in the comment. And with our guests, I've just picked some information on our house day families. So the last slide that I'll share, and then I'm throwing it open. So we send a survey to all our families that stay in our houses and use our learning program. And Olivia will just go to the next slide. So we try and survey our families at least twice a year, each individual family twice a year, but we don't try and override them. We send a range of really basic 5 questions, just seeing if Olivia can make that last slide go. And I'll share it with you too. So we ask the question, it's done through SurveyMonkey, so it's really easy. And we generally get around about a 13% return rate. And you have to understand, we're pretty happy with that because our families are going through a fairly traumatic experience in their life. And sometimes the last thing they want to do is talk about answering a survey when they're trying to deal with the survival or the ongoing management of their children. But we do get about a 92% agreement, really strongly agree on 4 basic questions about was their experience checking in and checking out great, what was the room and facility standards, were our team respectful and friendly, and of the free texts, we actually analyse how many of them were positive comments and negative comments. And overall, we're getting a 92% of all comments are coming in at being strongly agreed and agreed. So I think we're in the right direction. Interestingly, because we offer our services for nothing and they're so grateful of many a time, our families often don't want to tell us what's wrong. They're too appreciative, and so we've got to drag it out of them. And I commonly find myself walking around the house saying, tell me what's wrong, please, because if we don't fix it, we can't make our service any better. So that's a little two-edged sword I think not-for-profits often run to when you're offering services to clients, particularly without cost. That's me at a nutshell. And I just was going to be quiet and hand it back over to comments, or we're going to breakout chat rooms pretty soon, I know as well. So thanks for your time. Hope I didn't teach you all to suck eggs, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate that. And again, a very important topic. So, you know, we have values that we've articulated. Actually, we got Marie Claire to help facilitate a session to embed those values and identify behaviours that are congruent with them and incongruent with them. I really like the fact that you've got everything on one page, including examples. So I think we might actually steal that, adopt it, you know, mimic with flattery, whatever you want to call it. So yeah,
steal away, anyone. And we're happy to share detail and other things that anyone would love to have a chat offline anytime.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that generous offer. And yeah, look, it is critically important. We've identified middle of last year that values were the main criteria for us in hiring the right people. You know, if you've got people who've got great skills and they're not congruent with the values or the culture, then it's actually a net negative, and you're best to not have those people in the business. You can teach skills. It's so much harder to teach attitude and approach. So, so yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Has anybody got any comments for John? I see Joe, you've got your hand up.
Before Joe jumps in, I meant to say too, with listening to Christine and Leonie's conversation, just so you know, globally in Ronald McDonald House Charities across the world, it is the #1 strategic direction that the global charity has identified is improved inclusiveness and diversity across the world, and trying to manufacture that across 45 countries. And how does that respond to areas like China and Hong Kong, where we are in, versus the US and all over the place. So really interesting. I do agree with you. I think it is the burning deck of the world at the moment. So I'll be quiet and let Joe.
I don't want you
Joe,
to be actually, John. I want you to keep talking. I find it fascinating. Culture fit is actually what my recruitment is based on. So I love hearing about it, especially in the NFP space, which I have some outside knowledge of, but I've never worked inside one. So it's really interesting. One of the things that consistently came up for me, though, is all of these discoveries that you make, how did they feed, and Tristram actually kind of made the link before I could, how does that feed back into the hiring process? And, you know, one of the things that I really encourage a lot of my clients to do is really, really extensive exit interviews as well as part of that. So if you could talk a bit more about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, it certainly has embedded into our hire and fire. And I agree with Tristan now. We've got a very clear message that says we hire for the values and attributes of a person rather than their skill set and their experience, because we think you can teach a monkey, no offense to people, things to do. It's about your fundamental values basis that you come from. So a lot of our early interviewing questions are all about people's personal ethics and values, and what gives them what I use the term, what gives you your mojo in the morning to get out of bed and be motivated. So we really see that as important, and it's in every advertisement we do now. Our values are actually noted. Every position description starts with the values and the concept of the mission. So we've really made sure that we embed that into it. It's certainly part of the performance development plan. We actually have a conversation about how do you believe you are actually delivering on the values, and they physically talk about their behaviours. So we've tried to embed it, and yes, we offer exit interviewing to every person that exits. We still find it interesting that we still get a low pickup rate, and it'll be interesting, Joe, with other people's learnings. We do get it back, but not everyone elects to return it, which I find fascinating. Don't fascinate me when you've had to terminate someone or something like that, but just fascinating when people say, I'm moving on to do something else, wish you well, and they still don't complete it. So be interested to hear what other people say about that. But that's the next nut we think we need to try and crack a bit more.
I think, John, that was one question I was going to ask you, is what is the rate of response to those exit interviews? Because a lot of the time, one area I work in is psychological safety around, people are out the door, they've exited, they've left for reasons which maybe they've been talking to the organization about in direct or indirect ways, and they haven't been addressed or for whatever reason. And then it's like, well, now you want to ask me, now I'm out the door? Why? Like there's a bit of that. It's quite complex, but I was going to be quite interested to see what is your response rate in terms of that. And you would find that your situation is not unique. People do struggle to get that information at exit interviews, and I think the trick for organizations is to try and get that information before you get to that exit stage, when the person is still invested in the organization, still wanting to make a difference and probably wanting to stay.
And Christine, I agree. So our exit interview response rate is less than 10%. Which is something we want to improve. But you're right, and that's been part of the basis of actually really pushing surveying culture. The engagement survey. Because then by showing that we're listening to people, we want to try and give them that sense culturally that if I raise something that's important and needs to be changed, someone will do something about it. And if we actually make the decision not to do something about something, we explain why we're not addressing a particular issue. So I'm in absolute agreement with you, Christine. That's why we've actually done action plans on our surveys, and we share the information in the normal events of the year, so they see that we're actually trying to improve and change things, and it's almost holding us to account. I agree with you. Fix it while they're here, and we look at more the neutral. If someone's disengaged, they're probably going to leave you anyway. As we know from surveying, it's those neutrals that we know that you can swing them back into being engaged if you actually work with them and are much more positive. So we've been really interested in our neutral engagement rate as well.
I think just to add a point there, John, one of the trickiest parts of establishing and maintaining a culture is getting the buy-in from people within the organization to hold each other to account. Because when you have a few people who are engaged and believe in the culture and they uphold the values, and you have others that don't, the tendency is to leave that to the leadership team, specifically the business leader or senior management, to tackle that issue. And quite often it's not raised until the people are walking out the door and they explain that they don't feel like, people are pulling their weight or participating to the same degree. So I think that the best way of propagating that culture is to empower and review the ability of team members to hold each other to account, and that may hopefully prevent people leaving because they feel that they're just not, others aren't participating in an equal or equitable way. Joe, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. Sorry. Is my technology working? I don't know. One thing I did want to ask, and this was also about, buy-in and employee ownership of culture. John, you talked a lot about the touch points that you increased. So it wasn't necessarily large changes you made, but you made it more frequent, the touch points with both your employees and your clients and people's ability to receive feedback and give feedback. And how do you feel that? I think that directly correlates with how much buy-in people are going to have. Have you got any data on that? I'd like to hear if you had any.
No, I haven't, I have to say. I just one of the downfalls of it, as I was introducing it, I wanted to just share was that some people thought I was starting to meddle in their world, and some of them got a little bit defensive that what's the boss doing walking around talking to the staff, and is there something I need to know? And it was just very interesting. There were a few people that were a little nervous as they saw this behaviour change as I came into the organisation. So, but I hate to tell you, Joe, I've got no data or reality. I suppose it just was my personal experience that the power of influence is about doing and not saying, and putting, stepping up to the plate. It's a bit like that experiential learning of the VR. I think, it's really about what you see and what people actually physically do that makes the difference.
So, look, thank you, John, and we will just park that session there, although we're going to go to the breakout rooms and we'll have 10 minutes or so just to talk about the topics that are selected. So we've had a couple of changes to the breakout rooms. So we did have Melissa Langton, who was going to be running a session for us, and unfortunately she's had to pull out because she's having her COVID jab and the appointment's made for her and she just has to be there. So she was going to talk about making home work, working from home. And we did have Nigel Harris, who was going to be running fundraising, framing fundraising through a social purpose lens. Unfortunately, he's got a client who had to meet him and it had to be at this time, so he was unable to make it either. So I've basically divided people up into what's the most aligned session that we do have. So Brett Perkins has kindly joined us to run the managing risk and governance session, and Joe is going to be talking further about how to create empowered employees through culture creation. So a bit of a practical hands-on workshop environment to ask some questions about how to do these things. So we'll break into the breakout rooms for about 10 minutes or so. I'd really appreciate it if you can stick around to the end. We have a survey, just quick feedback form, just 3 or 4 simple questions. And it's great to get the feedback. It would also be really useful. There is a free text field that says at the end, what other topics would you like to see? Anything that you can add in there would be really useful for us to know. And the other thing is that if you could advise whether the middle of the day works well for you, whether you'd rather have it at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. So we've put it on because originally it was an in-person forum and it was, going to be lunch-based, and obviously, that's not happening online. So yeah, just really like to get your feedback about whether this time slot works well, or whether it would be easier to have it at another time slot. So we'll just go to the breakout rooms now. I've allocated everyone to what looks like the most appropriate based upon your selections, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming along, and I'm sorry we had to end the sessions while they were in full flight. We did go over a little bit with the main presentation, but they're also thoroughly no John, that's a great sign, because it means it's really engaging, and that's what we're aiming for here, is to give people ideas that stimulate the conversations that help to drive new ideas and greater impact. That's exactly what the whole purpose of this is. So look, thank you very much everybody. For those who want to continue and just finish the conversation, we're happy to keep the meeting open for a little while. What I will do right now, though, is ask everybody to just quickly click on the, hopefully you can see the QR code on the screen, and just get you all to quickly click on that and feed. There are just 3 quick questions to rate the presentations, and then a free text field to suggest any topics you'd like to see in the future. And again, if as I just to remind you, if you can confirm whether you think this is the right kind of time of day, whether it would work better first thing in the morning, last thing in the afternoon. I'm a bit shy of last thing in the afternoon because I think people's diaries tend to get busier and busier as the day goes on. But if it's better to do it in the morning, I'm happy to do that. If you're happy with this timing, then we'll stick with it. But yeah, just want to make sure that it works for everybody, and it's not just my idea of what I think will work. So please do enter that information. And yeah, thank you again to everybody who participated today. So everyone who registered and attended, I really appreciate you making the time and hope you found it to be valuable. Thank you so much to Patum for sharing about Microsoft's updates, to Christine and Leonie for that really interesting session about augmented reality and VR, John for your session, and again to Joanne and Brett for coming along and facilitating those breakout rooms. We didn't have as long as would be ideal. And again, feel free to make the comment in the field if you think that, you know, the session is too crammed, or if you'd like it to go longer. Happy to get all the feedback we can. So yeah, thank you everybody. Please do fill those forms in, and you know, feel free to unmute and pick up the conversation if you want to, and obviously understand if you need to get off to the next thing.
All right. Thanks, Tristan. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, Brett. Appreciate it.